Hello and welcome to this Blender lecture for ID116, Module 4, Low Poly Modeling and Edit Mode Tools. We will discuss the basic building blocks of our models known as vertices, edges, and faces, and how we can select and modify these blocks. We will discuss some of the most common tools used to shape and create detail in our models. When we are finished, we will have created this simple scene. If you haven't already done so, delete your default cube, light, and camera. We will add these back as they are needed. We're going to begin by creating a reference object. When beginning to work in Blender, you might not think much about scale, but it is important and will affect your models in unexpected ways. An easy way to set yourself up for success is to create a simple reference model. In this case, I am going to create a model that represents an average human male at 1.7 meters. So we're going to use Shift A to bring up our Add menu, and we're going to bring in a cube. Before I go any further, I'm going to go ahead and change my render type from rendered to solid view. Makes it a little easier to work. Now, there are a number of different ways that I could change the shape of this object or the dimensions of this object. I'm going to use the menu on the right-hand side here, and we can toggle that open and close with the N key. For the X and Y, we're going to make it half a meter wide. And for the Z-axis, or the up and down axis, we're going to put it at 1.7 meters. Now, one thing that I want you to notice when we did this, we have now changed the scale of our object. And in Blender, the scale needs to always be 1. So in this case, I'm going to press Control A, and that's going to bring up the Apply menu. And I'm going to select Scale. That sets everything back to 1. Anytime that I resize an object outside of edit mode, I need to make sure I reset that scale to 1. Let's select the Y so that we can get an orthographic view. I'm going to move this up so it is sitting at 0. So we press G and Z on our keyboard. I press and hold Control, and that's going to allow me to snap. Now you'll notice right away it's not snapping where I want it to snap. Well, if I zoom in a little further, then Blender will start snapping to a smaller increment, G and Z. And so now we'll see that it snaps right to where I want it to be. So while I'm building, as long as I keep this in mind that this is an average height, then most everything I build will be pretty close to real world sizes. G and X, we're going to slide that out of the way. So next, I think we will build the room that is going to hold our objects. Shift A to open that Add menu, bring out a cube. Again, 2 meters is kind of small. This is 2 meters by 2 meters by 2 meters. So let's go ahead and just make this a little bigger, and we'll say 4. So if you're still thinking in feet, that's about 12 feet. Let's apply our scale. And let's bring it up so that it sits at 0. All right. Now we are going to go into edit mode by pressing Tab. And you will remember that our building blocks of any mesh that we have is going to be vertices, which is number 1 on your keyboard, edges, which is number 2 on your keyboard, and polygons, which is number 3 on your keyboard. Now, 1, a vertex is a pointed space. 2, an edge is any connected 2 vertices. And then finally, 3, polygons is any closed set of edges. In this case, we want to select the top polygon. I'm going to hold Shift and select the 2 polygons closest to me. Press Delete on my keyboard. And then when we delete things in Blender, we have a lot of options. I could delete the vertices of these objects, which is going to delete any polygon connected to those vertices. I could delete the edges, which again would delete any additional polygons that were connected to those edges. But in this case, if I just say delete only the faces, it's going to leave everything else, which is what I want. So let's tab out of this to get back into object mode. Now we're going to add a modifier to give our room a little bit of thickness. So I've already selected my modifier panel. It's the one that looks like the blue wrench. We're going to click Add Modifier, And if you want to browse through, you can. But if you know the name of your modifier, all you have to do is type it in. And this is called the solidify modifier. And we'll go ahead and apply that. So right now it's not adding much thickness, so we'll change that here, and we'll say 0.1. And if we look at it, we'll see that it's not, let's increase that just a little bit, let's say 1. We'll see that it is thicker at the top than it is at the bottom, and just doesn't really look like we want it to. When we come back over to the modifier itself, and we click on even thickness, that's going to even that out for us. I'm going to go ahead and put that back to 0.1. So our room is now complete. Next, we will build a plank floor to kind of fill out our scene. If we go back to the reference, we'll see that I've got a plank type floor down there. So let's learn how we made that. Again, we start off with a cube, so Shift A, select Mesh Cube. I'm going to go ahead and bring this up just a little bit on the Z-axis. And with all the modifications I'm going to be making to this particular shape, I'm going to do them within edit mode. The reason for that is so I don't have to come out and reapply my scale. So if I tab over, any changes made here will affect the dimensions of our object, but it will not affect the scale. The scale will remain 1. Going to scale it down on the Z-axis, hit S for scale, Z to constrain. Zoom in just a little bit on that. Want that to be a little thinner. Looks good. All right. Let's scale it down on the X-axis. So S for scale, X to constrain to that axis. And then finally, scale it on the Y to finish filling it out. Now, as of what I have right now is a perfectly straight, nondescript plank of wood, if you will. We can use our tools to add some details and to customize this to make it fit our scene better. We're going to use our loop cut tool to begin with. Now, as a reminder, a lot of these tools are available here, and if you take this and drag it out, you will actually see that it does have the names for them as well. Now, one problem I have encountered with Blender is sometimes the button behaves differently than the shortcut tool. So as a rule, you will see that I use primarily shortcut keys. Very seldom do I come over and click on these buttons, but I want you to be aware that they're there and you can use them, but they do behave differently than the shortcut keys. So I'm going to go ahead and hide that toolbar again with T. And to access the tool that I'm going to use, the loop cut tool, I'm going to press Control R. Now, when I press Control R, if I hover over any edge, we'll see that a yellow highlighted edge appears. That's going to connect all of those edges with new edges when I use my loop cut tool. If I scroll my mouse wheel, I can add multiple cuts at the same time. And so I will left click now, so that confirmed the number of cuts. If I drag the mouse back and forth, I can slide my cuts. If I press left click, it will put them there. If I press right click, it's going to add the cuts spaced evenly along the area. And that's what I did here. Let's add one more loop cut. Control R. And we're going to add one going down this way. What do we do with these loop cuts to begin to add detail? Well, press 2 on your selection mode to make sure we're in edge selection mode. We're going to press Control B, which activates the bevel tool, and that's going to allow me to round off that edge. By rolling the mouse wheel, I can add more cuts. Since we're going for a low poly style, I think I'm just going to leave these at 1. And so now I have sheared off the edge of that board. Pay special attention always to your last action panel here. Lots and lots of options. That allow us to change how this tool behaves. I don't want to overwhelm you with them today. Just want you to be aware that this is here and you're paying attention to it. As we go through this semester, we will discuss them more and more. I'm going to select this edge. Again, Control B to bevel. I'm just going to bevel it out a little bit. Now, what I want to do is I want to get rid of those faces. So they're already selected, so I'm going to press Delete, and we'll say Faces. Now I have a hole in my model. Technically, that makes my model non-manifold, which is bad for 3D printing. Luckily, we're not 3D printing this, but there's an easy way to fix this hole that I just put here. If I press the 1 on my keyboard, that's going to take me to vertex selection mode, and as I click and hold shift on each of these 4, I'm going to create a new polygon there by hitting the F key or the fill key. This time we're going to grab this edge and I'm going to drag it down. Now, if I just hit G, I might end up doing this, and I don't want to do that. So I could press G and then Y, and then I could slide it down if I wanted. But I could also just press GG, and that is going to make it stick to the current edge. So there are many things to master. Let's go ahead and bevel this, Control B. We're going to delete those, faces only. Press 1 to go to vertex selection mode. Hold shift, select those vertexes. Press F for fill. And we can continue to do this all the way down our floorboard. Now, what do I do here? I want to access the stuff there, but my wall's in the way. Well, there's a number of things I could do. I could go to wireframe mode if I desired. I could also have my object selected and use the / key on my keypad, and that's going to isolate my object. To bring everything back, simply press the / key on your numpad again. Let's go ahead and bevel this edge. Delete those faces. And then one final thing I might do here, I'm going to press Z on my keyboard, which brings up my rendered radial panel. And I'm going to go to wireframe. We're going to grab those vertices, G and X. I'm just going to move them just a tiniest bit on the X axis, GX, just to add a little bit more variation to my shape. Press Z again, select solid. Let's press tab to exit out. And there we go. That's quite a bit more interesting than just a straight piece of wood. Next, we can finish this off, at least this shape, we can finish off this plank by adding a bevel modifier. The bevel modifier is going to do to the whole thing what we did to those individual pieces. Now, 0.1 is too much, so I'm going to say 0.05. Maybe that's even too much, so 0.01. There we go, that's better. I'm not sure what happened there. Let's go ahead and make that a 5. See what that is. I think I like 1 better. 0.01. So the other thing that I want to change here would be the number of segments. I'm going to increase it to 2. And so now we have ourselves a nice looking floorboard. Let's go ahead and bring our room back by pressing the / key on my numpad. And now we're going to go ahead and position this object where it would be in the room. going to go to wireframe mode for this. Press G. Make sure I have the object selected, that would help. Now press G to grab. Let's press Z to move it just on the Z axis. And then we're going to press G and X and move it just on the X axis. All right. Now, your first instinct may be to make a lot of copies of this and just start trying to position them. And that's not a horrible way to do things, but there are more efficient ways to do things. So let's hit Tab to go into edit mode. Press A to select everything. Shift D to make a copy. X, so we only move on the X axis. And then we're going to reposition this a little bit. I think next we will rotate it. Rotate on the Z 180. Now I did that all by pressing keystrokes. Now instead of just one board, now we have two boards, so that's going to make quite a bit of variation having those. Now, again, I could make copies. I could continue to make copies inside the edit mode as well. But I want to introduce you to another tool that we use quite often, and that's called the array modifier. So with my object selected, I go to my modifier panel. I'm going to open it up. I'm going to type in array. Now, there are several things we need to look at when it comes to the array tool. First off is the count. How many copies is it going to make? Okay. How far apart is each copy going to be? That looks pretty good right there. Now, something we can do, say we don't really like how that's filling out. We want it to fill out just a little bit. We want to be able to add one more. I'm going to hit Tab, hit A to select everything, Scale, and then X to scale just on the X axis. I will bring them together just a little bit so that I can add one more set to them. S for scale on the X axis. And then we're going to just finesse this into place just a little more. So G and X. And we're just going to put that right into place there. So now we can see that we've got ourselves a nice wooden floor. Up next, let's make the table. Now for this, there are many, many different ways we could do it. I myself am going to try to work as efficiently as possible so that we get through this tutorial and you get the information you need. So I'm going to begin by copying my floorboards. So Shift D, once they're selected, press Z so I move on the Z axis only. And now I can begin to modify this to be my table. First things first, I don't think I need 5 copies. Maybe we could just do with just 2. Let's Tab. And since this is a table, I'm going to make these much smaller. So S for scale, and we want to do it on the Z axis only. I'm sorry, the X axis only. And so we're going to bring those together a little bit tighter like that. And let's go ahead and bring them down a little bit in the Y axis as well. And since it's a table, we'll scale it a bit on the Z as well. All right. So there's our tables, easy peasy. But let's finish the table off just a little bit. Let's make it a little better. Okay, so again, I want to work as efficiently as possible. So in this case, I'm going to copy the tabletop with Shift D. We're going to rotate on the Z axis 90 degrees. I'm going to isolate the pieces I'm working with. First things first, I know I don't need that many copies, so we can get rid of our array. I'm going to tab into edit mode. I'm going to completely get rid of one of these. Now, if I want to select everything that is linked together, like everything that is part of this plank, all I have to do is hover over next to part of it and press the L key. That's going to select all linked parts. And then we're just going to delete the faces on that one. Let's go ahead and customize this now. So A to select everything, S for scale, X. I think that's okay. One thing that I always like to do is I like to reset my origin whenever I go moving things. You'll notice that my origin does not line up with the actual object. Right click, set origin, and I'm going to say geometry to origin. G and Z, and we just position this in place. Now, I could make a copy if I desired to, but a little better way, a little faster way, is for me to use a modifier. In this case, it's going to be a mirror modifier. The mirror creates a copy or a mirror of the object based on whatever I tell it to. So currently it is mirroring on the wrong axis, but that's okay. We'll just go and we'll mirror it on the right axis. Let's position this a little better. Just so, there you go. And then finally, we could probably use some legs for our table. Once we have the supports in place, let's build a couple of legs to hold our table. So we're going to say Shift D to duplicate, Z to move on the Z axis, Tab to enter into tab, and then we're going to begin rotating and modifying our objects to be the legs. So we'll start by rotating on the X, R and X. We're going to do it 90 degrees. Press enter. Let's rotate on the Y this time, 45 degrees. Enter. Going to tab out of edit mode, back into object mode. Going to reposition them out here. Might have to make those a bit smaller at some point, but that's okay. Let's say Shift D to duplicate one more time inside of edit mode. Hit enter to place it exactly where it is. Press R to rotate, Y to maintain the rotation to the Y axis, and press 45. Oops, let's do 90. There we go. So now, you may not think too much about having it like this, where you have the two pieces intersecting one another, but you absolutely, absolutely do not want those faces to be in the same place. So very simple fix for that. Select one of your objects, and then we're going to move it just the tiniest bit so that they are not occupying the same space. Let's tab out of that. We've got ourselves a pretty good looking table. Let's bring everything back so we can see how it fits in the room. All right, we're getting there. Okay. Now, this object is made up of 3 separate models. I could combine all of these together, but I want to introduce you to the idea of parenting. So parenting is where we have what are called parent-child relationships. And that is, I'm going to select a child and another child, and then finally the last object I select is going to be the parent object. To parent them together, I press Control P. It says Set Parent to Object. So you'll notice I now have these little rubber bands that go from the orange objects to the yellow object. If I want to move the whole table, I can select just the yellow to object or the top, and I can move them. Let's go ahead and position that where it belongs. And now we have our floor and our table. All right, continuing on, I think we will work on the table next. Now, if you have an object selected, you press period on your numpad, it will zoom you right to that object. So we're going to make this next. So as usual, we're going to start with our add menu, Shift A, go to mesh. This time I'm going to go ahead and make it out of a cylinder. Uh, 12 is fine for our number of segments. We are doing a low poly. I could change things like the width and the depth if I decided to there. And again, that's all in my last action panel. But instead, I'm just going to bring this up a little bit on the Z-axis. Press Tab, scale it down. Scale it again just on the Z-axis. Go ahead and put that into place. Tab back over into edit mode. Scale Z again, just make it a little smaller. I'm going to press 3 to go into polygon selection mode. I'm going to select that top polygon and I am going to inset it. Now inset will create like a frame of polygons to go around this polygon. So as I inset that in, we'll see that we have now just basically this frame of polygons going around this center polygon. The reason we want to do that is because these polygons are quads, where this polygon is a n-gon, meaning it has multiple faces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. A quad only has 4. And when we go to put our bevel, non-quads give us issues. So we just want to inset that a little bit. Let's go ahead and inset the bottom a little bit as well. I'm not going to do a whole lot on this stool. I think I might put a few nicks in it. So let's do that. Let's press 2 to select edges. And then we'll Control B to bevel that. Delete those faces. Now, earlier I showed you that we could select the 4 vertexes and create a face by pressing F. We can also select at least 3 edges, and then we can create a face out of that as well. So Control B to bevel, delete those faces, select the edges that you want to make a new face from, and there you go. Let's put one more. So let's go ahead and add the bevel. And it just gives it a nice rounded edge on it. Okay. Some legs for our stool. This is such a small piece, I'm almost going to put almost no detail into it. Simply just going to be a really simple cylinder. Okay, let's rotate this a little bit on the y-axis, and then we'll position it, move it on the x-axis, and let's go ahead and add a mirror modifier. And what we'll do here, we're going to do this different. Okay, so once we finished with the roof, once we finished with the top of the stool, let's add another cylinder. We just need to resize that as we've learned how to do. Using the shortcut keys. Let's go ahead and rotate that. And we're just going to kind of position it. Now Shift D to make a copy of that one. We're going to move it just on the X-axis, rotate it on the Z 180 degrees, move it out just a bit more. Shift D, rotate Z 90 degrees. Now, if I have multiple objects such as this, where it was just easier to place them using them as objects rather than elements within the object, I can select them all, and now I can press Control J, and that's going to turn them into a single mesh. Let's go ahead and do the parenting again. We want to parent the legs to the top of the stool, so Control P, and now wherever the stool goes, wherever the top of the stool goes, the legs will follow. Now we will begin working on the dishes for the table. Up to this point, we have left our 3D cursor at world origin and moved our objects into place. But it would be easier if we could just have our objects come in where we were working on them. So I can shift right click and I can move my 3D cursor. So now that's my insertion point. So as I say Shift A to bring up my add menu and I bring in my cylinder, we'll see that instead of coming in at origin, it comes in here where I've placed the 3D cursor. Let's tab into edit mode, scale this down. We're going to inset this top face. Actually, let's just go ahead and inset both of them at the same time. So let's hide everything with /. Press Shift to select both of them, I, and then we can inset them. Let's go ahead and grab the whole thing with A, scale on the Z axis. I've selected the outer ring. I did that by being in polygon selection mode, holding Alt while clicking the edge in the direction I want to go. We're just going to bring that up a little bit. Very simple little bowl, or simple plate, but it will serve our purposes just fine. Let's tab out of that. Let's add our bevel. Sometimes Blender does not like to do these corners correctly, so I have found that by coming in and changing the geometry profile from sharp to arc will sometimes clear up any issues you might have. Overall, I think that looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and bring our table back. Well, rather than making a whole new primitive to make the bowl out of, I'm simply going to copy this one, Shift D, Z to bring it up on the Z axis. Let's go ahead and enter into our edit mode. If I toggle over here, I can turn off the effect of the bevel. In this case, I want that off. So we're going to inset both the top and the bottom again. Actually, I'm just going to scale that down. We'll just say scale. There we go. Let's grab that and say Z, so we're going to drag it down. With polygon selection mode, I press Alt and I click the edge in the direction that I want to select the ring for. We're going to do some extruding here, so press Control E. I lied. Press Alt E, and we're going to say extrude faces along normals. That's going to allow me to add a little more there, and then we will just bring that up a little bit. So G and Z to bring those up. And one more time with the Alt E to extrude faces along normals, just to give it a little more definition. Okay, so now we have a bowl. I'm going to go ahead and make the bowl just a little smaller. So scale, Shift Z. I don't want to make it smaller on the Z axis, just on the X and the Y. And remember, I've modified my scale, so I need to make sure I apply that. Control A, apply scale. And let's go ahead and toggle our bevel back on. So now we have a really nice looking bowl to go with our plate. And then one more. Kind of move it over to the stool. All right, let's make a spoon. So Shift A, mesh, cube. We were inside the cube. That's what happens. So let's scale this down, of course. Zoom in on it. Scale on the Z. G, Z to bring it up in object mode. Tab back into edit mode. Let's go ahead and grab this. Bring it down. Select everything with A. Scale it on the X a little bit. Basically just trying to make a spoon shape. Control R. Going to add 3 loop cuts there. We will take this loop cut. We will take this loop cut here and scale it down just a little bit and maybe move it this way. So G and Y. Okay, scale on this one. Shift Z. G. Z, bring it down just a little bit. Let's go into edge selection mode again. Scale that one down. Go to polygon selection mode, select this top polygon. Let's inset this just a little bit. And then I'm going to extrude it inwards. So I'm just going to press E and we'll extrude it inwards. And that's a lousy spoon. I made a better one earlier. This is the one you're getting, sorry. But you get the basic idea, I hope. Let's bring that stuff back. Scale it down. I think I know what I can, I know something I can do to make this better. So let's Control R to add a loop cut. We're gonna scale that a little bit just on the X axis. Maybe we'll bring that down just a little bit on the G. And G, and that should be Y. So, yeah, that might be a little better. It's a very low poly spoon. Let's go ahead and put our bevel on it, so make it look as good as we can. We'll say 0.01. Oops, didn't mean to press that. We'll talk about that at another time. All right, let's bring it back. I'm going to set my origin here, set origin, origin to geometry. That'll make it a little easier to put it in the bowl. So we'll bring it down. Might be a bit big. That's all right. We can always scale them. I want to make this whole bit of it smaller. I missed some polygons there. Broke a bunch of stuff. Ah, I see what I did. Yeah, I broke that all down, didn't I? There we go. Now we'll scale it. So what happened there was I did not grab the polygons on the back side of my model, and that's what caused it to break. There we go. I think that's going to look a little better. Let's go ahead and reset that origin. Just rotating it into place, and then I'm going to place it so that it looks like it's sitting in my bowl. All right, so hopefully that you take that as a good example of not everything's going to work out exactly the way you think it should. That spoon did not look anything like I was going to make it, but I am trying to record myself do this entire thing, and I don't want you to know how many times I've already done this. Okay, moving on. We have a couple more things to build, and then we are about done with this part of the project. Let's go ahead and build the candle next. All right, so the candle, again, is going to be made from a base cylinder. Tab into edit mode, scale that way down. Let's go ahead and exit edit mode and bring it up in object mode. And now we can begin to shape it into the shape that we're wanting it to be. So like I said, in this case is going to be a candle holder. We're going to inset those. I for inset. Let's bring those down just a little bit. G and Z. We're going to bring them down. A to select everything. S for scale. Scale it on the Z axis to make it thinner. Let's go ahead and inset this. We're going to extrude out the center polygon there. So E for extrude. Let's go ahead and inset that one more time. And then extrude it inwards, and that's where our candle is going to sit. Now I want to add just a little bit of detail to this to make it look, more like a candle holder. So Control R for my loop cut tool. We're going to put in a loop cut right there. I'm going to select this row of polygons by holding Alt, clicking the edge in the direction I want to grab, and then we're simply going to scale those outwards. Looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and make the little ring for the candle holder. Shift A, add an object, mesh. In this case, we're going to add a torus. Now it's going to be huge, but again, 12 segments is not bad for low poly. So we're going to tab, scale, make it pretty small. G, Z, bring it up. Oh, I messed up. I am still in edit mode. So Control Z to undo that, hit Tab to get out of edit mode. And now we can move it up. There we go. Tab to enter edit mode, scale it just a little bit more. Let's rotate on the X 90 degrees. And let's just go ahead and put this into place right there. It's always a good idea when you're moving objects to grab and make sure that you constrain them to the axis you want. That way you don't accidentally move things to the wrong places. There we go. So there's my little candle holder. Let's put a candle in there. So I'm going to hit tab. I'm going to select the candle holder itself. I'm going to hit tab to go into edit mode. I'm going to select that polygon. I'm going to say Shift S, and we will say cursor to selected. That way, when I bring in my candle, which in this case is just, again, a cylinder, it's going to be sitting right where I want it to be, and that will be nice. All right. All right, so now at the top here, I want it to be kind of uneven. So I'm going to go to vertex selection mode by pressing 1. And then I'm just going to click on 2 of these. I'm going to use my proportional editing, which allows me to select 1 or 2 vertices, edges, or faces, and then those will control the edges around them. In this particular case, I'm doing random. And so when I go to grab, we'll see that I get this circle. And I only want it to go random on the z-axis. So as I do this, you'll notice that some of them move more than others. And I think I kind of liked it a little better before. Yeah, I think that looks pretty good. Kind of random, similar to the top of a candle. Very last thing we need to add is a fuse for this. So Shift A one more time, and we're going to say cylinder. Scale that way down on the inside. Let's scale it some more. Accidentally left proportional editing on. It's not always the greatest idea. And I'll just scale that down. Okay. Let's reset my origin because I know I messed it up. So origin to geometry, G, Z, and there we have our candle. So let's go ahead and select all the children. So let's do one more thing before we do that. So let's Shift A, mesh, and I want a UV sphere, and we're going to make it into the flame. So again, we'll use that proportional editing for this. Oh, I need to turn that off of random though, turn it over to smooth. There we go. And so now we have a pretty nice looking little flame to go on top of our candle. Actually hit H, which hides your objects. Alt H will bring any hidden objects back. All right. So the flame is the child of the wick is the child of the candle is the child of the holder, and technically we're going to make it back like this. So all the orange ones are the children of the yellow object. Control P. Now wherever I move that to, all of the children will come with it. All right, let's make sure that's sitting on the table. Pretty close. Now for this demonstration, the last thing that I'm going to model is going to be a tankard to hold some ale or other refreshing drink. And you guessed it, it's going to be made out of cylinder. Let's scale that down inside edit mode. Let's go ahead and bring it down near the table. let's get it off the candle. There we go. All right. Hit tab to enter edit mode. Let's select this top face. We're going to delete it. So we'll delete that. We're going to grab these edges, and I did that by pressing 2 on my keyboard to go into edge selection mode. I press Alt and I select one of these edges. It will select all the edges in the loop. We're going to scale that down a little bit. Let's make sure we turn off proportional editing. I think that looks pretty good. Let's make it a little bit smaller maybe. Let's go ahead and add a solidify modifier to it. Don't want it to be quite that thick. Make sure, okay. And we'll say 0.001. Let's make that 0.005. You know, I'm just going to leave it at that. No, I did it again, didn't I? 0.01 is fine. It's a little thicker than I wanted it, but it's fine. Okay. Now, we need to add a couple of bands to it. So again, we're going to use our friend the loop cut tool. And I'm just going to put those there. We'll right click. Now we're going to bevel these. So Control B. We'll bevel those edges. And now we're going to press Control E to extrude. Alt E to extrude. And we're going to extrude along normals. That way everything moves out in the correct direction. Pretty happy with that. The last thing that we should have on there would be some sort of handle. So I am simply going to make a duplicate of this little handle. So Shift D. And then I want to clear the parent. So we're going to press Alt P and we'll clear parent. There it is. I wasn't sure where I went. On G and Z. G and X. Let's go ahead and scale this up a little bit. Go scale. Tab to go into edit mode. I'm basically going to delete this half of it. So delete those faces. Shift Z to exit out of wireframe mode. Let's go ahead and bring this over here. So G and X, G and Z. And then we have our tankard with our handle. So let's go ahead and select the handle first, then the glass itself, Control P to parent. Perfect. All right, and so there is our very simple scene, modeled and created strictly from very basic objects. Next, let's take a look at basic texturing. For this demonstration, I wanted to primarily focus on the modeling aspect of things, so I'm not going to go into texturing as deep as I did last time. I'm simply going to apply colors to the objects. So let's jump over to our shading tab and let's begin to shade our objects. Now let's start with our room. Always a good idea to name your colors or your materials so you know what they're applied to. So we're going to call this room brown. And we're simply going to set this to a nice brown that we like. Now, to be able to see this, we will need to switch our rendered mode. We can do render preview, which is just going to go ahead and light it with the default lights, as well as the actual rendered image. Let's just do render preview for right now. And we're just going to make that orange just a little darker. So we'll bring down the value a little bit of it. Let's go ahead and create one for the floor. So we're just going to say floor, and this is going to be brown as well. I've already got one in here named floor, but that's okay. I'm going to make this one brown, except really, really dark brown. Just really set it apart from the walls. Let's grab some for the table and the legs. So in other words, we'll say table for this. Maybe it's a different kind of wood, right? It's a cherry wood. Now I think the table ought to be made out of the same color, and I have some from others as well. But we're going to say table. That looks pretty good. Again, this is really not anything about texturing, but just to kind of go through the basics. We use the principled BSDF. We can create one by clicking new. Base color is going to be the base color of it, whether or not it's metallic. Okay, so it changes the way the light interacts with it. IOR is index of refraction. We're not going to mess with that. Alpha is like visibility of it, right? So I want to make sure it has a good alpha. We're not too concerned about the rest of it for right now. I will talk about emission here shortly. But for now, you can play with things like the roughness. If it has 0 roughness, it's going to be very, very shiny. If it has a lot of roughness, it's going to be matte. The default is 5, which tends to look pretty good on most things. Let's go ahead and just keep texturing. So I want the table to kind of stand out a little bit. So I'm going to use some of these other colors I made before. Or I want the stool, I should have said. But I'm going to use some of these other colors here. So we'll throw that floor color on there. And then we'll do the same with the legs. Let's go ahead and quickly texture our plates. That's too close to the table, isn't it? So let's pick a different color for that. Now we'll make them the same color as the floor. That'll work. I really like to limit my color palettes. I don't use a lot of different colors. I just don't think they're necessary. So for the base of this, I've already got a black made. And so some of the things we can play with that is if I make it completely rough, that black is just going to look really, really flat. If I give it a little bit of roughness and then, you know, maybe not quite as much metallicness, we'll get a little better reflections off of it. Let's go ahead and just keep adding that. I've got a color for the candle already. Now on this one I did play with the subsurface scattering a little bit, but I don't have a lot of experience with that. So, but basically I'm trying to get the light to pass through the material. I'll update you on that as we get farther along. All right, and then finally we've got candle flame, which I've oops, wrong one. Didn't mean to do that. Let's go ahead and add that to the candle. So I've got a candle flame that I've already started. That is far too high. We'll say 5. And so this is going to be an emissive material, and it's going to give off a little bit of light itself. I'm actually going to put a light in there because I don't think it gives off enough light, but by adding an emissive material, it is capable. You are able to add light to your scene from your objects, in this case such as the candle flame. All right, very last thing to texture here is going to be the, okay, that's fine, perfect. All right, so we're almost done texturing. The last thing that we need to texture is going to be our mug. To do that, we're going to need 2 different textures. So we're going to begin by selecting the object, and I press tab to go into edit mode. Now from last time, I've already got the edges or the polygons on the outside of my extrusion selected. So I am going to press Control plus on my keypad, and that is going to expand my selection by 1. I'm going to come in here and create a new slot. slot number 1, and I'm going to say assign. Haven't put anything in slot number 1 yet, but slot number 1 is assigned to those faces. Now, with my mouse back over the 3D viewport, I press Control I. That inverts my selection, and I'm going to create a new slot, and I'm going to assign to those. Now let's go hit Tab to exit out. Let's go to slot number 1, and we're going to add a new material. Now this is going to be one of those browns, or we'll just make it a new brown. Somehow I did that incorrectly, but that's okay. I will fix it. This is for slot number 2. This is going to be the black part. Let's go back into edit mode. I'm going to Control I to invert my selection, and I'm going to make sure that slot number 2 is assigned properly. There we go. Now it is assigned properly. So now I get the black where I want it, and I have the brown where I want it. The handle, simply black. And there we have a very basic scene. Now we need to do one more thing before we can really move on, and that's to add some lights to our scene. So if I were to go to the rendered view, and let's make sure that we have scene world and scene lights on, we're not really getting a lot of light there. So I'm going to select my candle flame, do Control S, do Shift S, and we're going to say cursor to selected, Shift A, and we're going to go down to light, and we're going to bring in a point light. Now you'll remember from last week's discussion, a point light is like a light bulb and shines in all directions. So we're going to bring it up a little bit, and we can already see that we've got a lot more light. We'll bring it down. Now to make this look a little more convincing, there are some things that we can do. Number one, I'm going to change that light from being white to being a little warmer. And it's going to give the whole scene a little bit more color to it. There are a number of things I can do to finish this off. If I go into if I'm in my shading menu and I go to world, now I can change the color of the world. I actually want the world to be a little darker for this particular incarnation, so I'm going to do this. And that's just going to bring down the ambient light in the scene. Now, let's talk about render engines. We could probably bring this up just a bit more, let's say 25. That's okay. That looks good. Okay, so let's go look at render engines now. We've got a couple of things that we can do here. Number one, we can switch between Eevee or cycles. They both have their advantages. They both have their disadvantages. One of the new advances in Eevee is the ray tracing. Ray tracing is going to give you better looking shadows. Overall, Eevee is going to be faster, but it's just not going to maybe look quite as good. Let's switch over to cycles. And we can already see right off the bat how things look way different. I might go ahead and bring this up just a little bit so we have a little bit more ambient lighting. All right, so let's hop back to the modeling area. The very last thing I like to do is I don't like to leave my things just sitting in space, so I will usually make some sort of environment for it to sit in. Press Shift S, say cursor to world origin, Shift A to open the add menu, bring in a plane. We're going to go ahead and scale that up. I'm going to go to edge selection mode inside edit mode. I'm going to select those two edges. I want to extrude them upwards. Now I'm going to grab these two edges and I'm going to bevel them some. So Control B. Let's go ahead and right click this object. For most everything I've left it at shade flat. In this case I want to shade that smooth. Going to even that out a little bit. Let's hop over to our shading materials, our shading tab, so we can add a material to our area here. And we could go with the black or with that one. There we go. The absolute last thing we need to do is add a camera now. Shift A, camera. We want to make sure it is our active camera. If you don't, if you have more than one, you want to make sure that the camera you want is active. And you do that by finding it over here and clicking the little green icon. And now we're going to go to View, Align View, Align Active Camera to View. If it's not exactly where you want it, you can go to View by bringing up your sidebar here, Camera to View. Now wherever I move, that's what's going to, I'm actually moving the camera at this point. And render image. There's something in the way, which that's interesting. Try that again. That is so weird. Okay, we're going to figure out what this is. Okay, we're back, and this is what's happening when I render. This weird, odd stuff is popping up, and well, that's because I have some stuff sitting there that I forgot I had. So I had started this again, and that's yet another version of what you see there. So I'm simply going to make that so it doesn't render. And then let's render this now. Fingers crossed, it looks better than it did. There we go. Very nice. All right, so as with any great journey, this one is going to start simple. Over the last couple of weeks, we've learned quite a bit about Blender. We've learned quite a bit about the basics. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. I look forward to seeing what you create. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me.